The Pads came on today at Colts training camp, and their first round pick was the star of the show. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com, and I'm joined by the amicable as always, Jake Arthur, boots on the ground there at Colts training camp, the guy who's giving us the inside scoop every single day. And look, if you want to become an insider just like Jake and become like a Locked On Colts insider even, and chat with us directly and get that inside scoop, follow the link up in our show notes. Today was day 4 of training camp. They put the pads on. So look, Jake, we're not talking any receivers. We're not talking any pass catchers, nothing that fantasy football nerds like. We're only talking trenches today because that's all I care about. But there was one player that really stood out, and that's obviously first round pick Laiatu Latu. So in our first segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the edge room because big thing happened. Obviously, after we recorded yesterday's show. So I was kind of eating it with what I was saying about the Colts pass rusher's injury on yesterday's pre-recorded show. So we'll talk a little about that, talk about Richardson, obviously, and then talk about the defense having a great day. And obviously, all the players in the edge rush room having a great day. But the Colts were dealt a pretty massive blow yesterday, Jake. A pretty awful thing that we all had to see on social media when the news broke. Samson Ebukam, star pass rusher, maybe not star passer, but really, really good pass rusher for the Colts. 9.5 sacks last year, 10 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles, led the team in pressures, hurries, pass rush win rate, like literally every metric you could look at. He was the Colts' best pass rusher by all of them last season. And his 2024 season ends before it even begins with a torn Achilles, tearing his Achilles not even a quarter of the way through camp before the pads even come on. Just man, I know Colts fans are listening to this right now being like, of course this happens to us, but what a horrible, horrible blow, man, to this Colts pass rush that we had sky-high hopes for.
Yeah, and I think it's still in good shape, but it does shape how you think of it. Like, initially I was like, okay, so they should have a pretty good, consistent pass rush for 4 quarters in a game, like you would hope to. But now it's like, all right, so how do you shape this? Because right now, Dayo Adengbo obviously factors in, but he's missed the last 2.5 practices. You got to throw a lot on Laiatu Latu's play, and then Tyquan Lewis was great in a small sample size last year, but are you rolling the dice too much by giving him a bigger role this year? So you got a lot more questions now with your leading sacker going out. And it's not like if the Colts were losing Yannick Ngakoue or something a couple years ago, it becomes a really good run defender as well. So you are losing a 3-down edge who can lead your team in sacks and who had 10 tackles for loss. So it's definitely a big hit. So far, what we've seen just in one day of camp, I mean, when he left Sunday, when he got hurt, Tyquan Lewis came out there and filled in the rest of the way. They had the off day yesterday. That's when they found out, this was going to be toast and his season was over. So moving forward, it was primarily still Tyquan Lewis on rundowns, early down stuff, but more obvious passing situations. Laiatu Latu came in, which is, I think, what we could probably come to expect this year, except for, I imagine, if I had to guess, I would imagine Dayo Adengbo is probably going to be the starter with Latu getting the passing down attention. And then maybe you keep Tyquan in that similar role as last year, but maybe give him a few more snaps per game. Because, again, you kind of caught lightning in a bottle with a guy who has been plagued by injuries throughout his career and had this incredibly productive season in a limited sample size. So I probably wouldn't mess with that too much. But, I mean, we got to get Dayo Adengbo back out here first.
Yeah, for sure. And again, the human element, your heart breaks for a player like Ebukam, who just had his best career season in a new environment with the Colts, and it looked like he was going to keep taking those steps forward on a relatively good deal too for the Colts. I mean, it just so unfortunate to see. But going from the human element to the team element, obviously. Ebukam is signed through 2025, but the Colts could save $8 million if they cut him next offseason. He'll be 30, coming off the Achilles injury with $11 million cap hit. And if a player like Dio Dangbo has a great year and you need to make some space for Dio Dangbo, that's an obvious way to make that space. But hopefully he can get through this recovery really well. He can come back next year. We can have all these guys again next year and just really enjoy it. But we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that there. But yeah, like you said, this edge rush room, if there were any position group where this could happen and the Colts could survive with their depth, it certainly is the edge rush room, but it's still something you don't want to see, obviously. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the edge rushers in particular in our next segment, because we're going to do defense in our next segment. So put a pin in that, guys, because we do have to give you our daily Anthony Richardson update. And we had our first injury scare of training camp, Jake. I despise training camp because it could be anything from a major injury to a minor injury. And the cryptic tweets will always be like, Anthony Richardson got up slow and limped back to the huddle, like, looks concerning, or he's shaking it off or something, and you have no clue if he just broke his entire leg off or if it's a little bruise that he's just shaking off. So what was with the latest little injury scare that Anthony Richardson had, and is there any reason for anybody listening to be concerned right now?
No, I mean, I don't think there's any cause for concern right now. Like, obviously he's the type of guy who, until he gets through a full season, you're going to hold your breath every time. We all did. I mean, it's natural. He, unfortunately for him, hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt to be able to fall down yet and us not gasp. Yeah. But no, it was just like a toss play to Jonathan Taylor, and a lineman just stepped on him and tripped him up a little bit. He got up like looking a little uncomfortable, but he never missed a rep. He got back in there, finished practice, and then, by a few minutes later, you never knew anything happened, really. But of course, it's something to shuffle away in your mind and keep in there. But no, he's fine. I mean, Shane Steichen said afterward that it was nothing. He just got stepped on. We've seen that be bad before, but it was immediately bad. Like Jacoby Brissett, 2019, had to leave the game and miss the next game. But no, Anthony didn't miss any time. Looked uncomfortable for a minute and then was fine after that. And there's really no reason for us to have cause for concern. Now, if we get out here tomorrow morning and he's not out there, I'll change my tune. But I don't think any of us have reason for concern yet. But again, anytime something happens to him, until we know that he can carry the load for a season, that's just going to be how it is.
Yeah. And look, I have a horrible track record talking about Colts injuries in training camp so far this offseason, so I'm not going to say anything about this one. I'm just going to keep my mouth completely shut, but that's your report from Jake Arthur right there, guys. Real quick, though, before we get out of the segment, how did Richardson look on the day throwing the football? I know, like you kind of said at the top, it wasn't a big offensive day in today's practice, but overall, just how did Richardson look? Was he still completing, passes at a high rate like he was the first couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, pretty sharp and accurate like he has been throughout camp. This being the fourth day, he has completed his first 4 passes each day up until today. The fourth consecutive one was a nice play by Ronnie Harrison, who came on a blitz and just batted it at the line of scrimmage. So that snapped the streak. His only other incompletion on the day was a drop from Pittman that he should have had. So he was 4 of 6 today. He's had a really good completion percentage throughout camp. Obviously, with the pads coming on and this being a hot day out here and a shorter practice, there wasn't a lot of passing going on. The offensive stuff was just kind of focusing on moving the sticks and just general gameplay situations. But it was kind of a ho-hum day for the offense overall. Like it was just a day.
Awesome. Well, that's why we are talking defense, obviously, in this next segment. So get ready for some defensive talk, because the pads came on and a certain player got everyone's attention in today's practice. But first, I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head to fanduel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And are you guys watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, we're going to kick off this next segment, Jake, with a comment that we have in our YouTube section, which I know you guys listening were, you're going to, I'm just going to read the comment out to you guys, but you guys watching can obviously see it. Brayton Nicholas here says, wow, what a big surprise. Laiatu Latu was the most pro-ready edge in this draft class. And then sarcasm he puts in parentheses there. So I want to kick off this next segment about the defense with Laiatu Latu. I saw so much from all the Colts beat guys talking about Latu this, Latu that, Latu that. And did it make you guys all feel a little, like, again, the human elements in there, but did it make you guys feel a little bit more comfortable with the Ebukam injury, seeing how good Latu looked out there today, Jake?
Yeah, because, I mean, you have to give rookies grace and time to be rookies. Like, they don't have to be awesome right away. And Latu still may not when the game actually comes on. But I mean, it definitely does make me feel better that you have a pro-ready guy who can, at minimum, get you a handful of sacks on the year. Can he duplicate, Ebukam's 9.5 sacks and, all the pressures and hits he had? Like, hopefully, you draft a guy as the first defensive player off the board in the whole draft, hoping he could probably give you that production. But I definitely feel better. If you guys want to know how his day was, the Colts actually just posted a clip while we were talking, and it was Latu off the snap, just unreal speed. So if you guys haven't, go check that out. But that's what we saw all day today. With the pads coming on, we saw one-on-ones for the first time, O-line versus D-line, and he just makes people look silly. Like, poor Jake Witt. Like, if I'm Jake Witt, I'm saying this dude is up the depth chart now. Get him away from me. Like, the first play Latu had was just rocketing past Witt. And I can't remember what the name of the move is, but it's Yannick Ngakwe's signature move. What is that? It's almost like a Euro step.
Yes, it's the like cross chop. The cross chop.
Yeah, so he did that a couple times today, and it just was productive. Yeah. But even more so, like, literally just getting off the snap, so much speed, but he's got the flexibility to bend underneath the tackle's reach, and he's just going to live in the backfield that way. If he can keep it up and put that up against other, NFL caliber blockers. But I think after that first rep in one-on-ones, they realized they probably needed to get him on someone a little higher up than Jake Witt. So they gave him stiffer competition. I think Ryman kind of stalled him on one, but everything else, Latu was just incredible.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
He got an actual would-be sack in the 11-on-11s also. It was near the end of practice. So obviously you get a guy like Latu hoping he can be a closer for you, like in the fourth quarter. Anthony, bailed out running to his right side, and Latu is just right there behind him, like in his hip pocket the whole time. In a game, he could have sacked him 10 times on that one play. But super productive day from him, showed every trait that you would gush about him over pre-draft. Like, he looked the part today.
Good. That's what the Colts needed with the unfortunate injury announcement yesterday. So Laiatu Latu looking the part. Speaking of one-on-ones, though, Jake, I know you keep track of obviously all the wins and losses in one-on-ones. I'm not going to ask you to go through every single one here, but any other players on defense really stand out to you in those one-on-ones?
Kwity Paye as well. So he's undergone a transformation this offseason. Lost, I think he said 15 pounds, put on some muscle. We heard Eddie say that he's at the best offseason of any player he's ever been around. And he looks more explosive too. Now for Quiddy, he wanted to be a little bit better in all areas, but he wanted his endurance and longevity through a game to be improved as well for those fourth quarters. But God, he looks really good too. Just burst off the line, has that bend, but he's got probably a little more power than Latu does, so he can bull rush a little bit. But another guy in those one-on-ones that stood out to me was Adetomi Adebware. That guy has a bull rush to him. Like, God, is he powerful. I mean, he's an interior guy, so he's not going to hit you with a bunch of shake and bake, but he was driving dudes back the whole time. Like, I'm surprised no one wound it up on their rear in those, because like he had – I've got to imagine one of the worst feelings for an O lineman is being the defensive lineman has his hands on you and you're doing the back hop.
Oh,
and he had them doing that the whole time. It was really good to see. That's another guy who they could really could use him taking a big step this summer and earning a better role this coming year than he had as a rookie.
Yeah, I feel like the next step for him is like getting that bull rush down, obviously, is perfect. Getting guys doing the back hop, like you said, that's how they reestablish their position. But the next step after that, like get that bull rush down perfectly, right? The next step is working on disengaging once you get back there, because you're not really going to do much with the blocker still in front of you. Obviously, you can disrupt what the quarterback's doing and make it move, but take that one more step and show the ability to disengage. But that's great to hear from both of those young players there. Transitioning to 11 on 11s, though, you put out a tweet. I don't have it with me. I'm not going to post it here on the thing, but that got some confusion, Jake. So I need you to clarify here. You put a tweet out there saying Taekwon Lewis and Laiatu Latu are rotating in Samson Ebukam's spot with the starters. And I saw some people taking that tweet, meaning that those were the two defensive ends at the same time. Was it Kwity Paye out there with the first team at all times, and those two are rotating on the other side, right? That's what you meant?
Yeah, I didn't even realize that had been causing confusion. But no, they are sharing Samson Ebukam's spot. Still, Kwity Paye has been the constant there. But again, it's basically been Taekwon Lewis on those early downs with Latu coming in on passing situations, kind of sharing the pie a little bit. I would say Taekwon probably got a few more reps than Latu did. Again, the focus of today kind of was early down stuff to begin with. But Latu did still get a handful of reps with the ones today. But no, Kwity has never missed a beat. He's been out there the whole time.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to clarify that because I did see some people having that conversation on there. But yeah,
I was not aware.
Kwitty's locked in, guys. Kwitty's locked in as a starter. It looks like most of the starting defense stayed the same in terms of lineup. Jalen Jones still the other corner on the outside. So I don't want to say that competition is a wrap right now, but it kind of feels like it's pretty close to a wrap at this point. Anything stand out to you in 11 on 11s, though? Any guys who made big plays? Any moments that you want to highlight? Anything that really happened with these guys out there?
Yeah, a couple guys. Sorry, there's a guy on his mower just so close to me right now. So there was a couple guys who were like on the starting bubble, at minimum rotational kind of guys that made a couple plays. So Saguna Luby had maybe the best play of the day. Anthony completed a pass to Mo Alley Cox for like maybe 10 yards along the left side. But Alubi came in and stripped it and picked it up and ran the other way with it. So that was a really heads-up play by our guy Sagoon the Destroyer. Ronnie Harrison, I want to start talking a little more about Ronnie and having longer conversations about this whole thing. But just in a small little bubble here, Ronnie had a really heads-up play on a safety blitz where Anthony was trying to fire out the ball, to the outside, and Ronnie was just coming in there fast and hopped up and batted the ball down, which not everybody does. But I mean, it was just a really heads-up play for him, and that's a guy who's battling to become the starting free safety. And then last, the Colts obviously have some young defensive backs that you just really want to see make some plays and not just be anonymous, non-player characters out there. Micah Abraham had a really competitive pass breakup against Evan Hull earlier, and obviously a small corner going up against a pretty well-built, powerful running back. You obviously, if you're able to win that matchup against Joe Flacco being the quarterback too, that was good to see. And Micah Abraham is firmly in the mix to be that backup nickel to Kenny Moore. So that's definitely great to see one of the young guys making plays, because I know Jalen Simpson made a little noise in the previous practice as well.
Yeah, these two late round corners seem to be making a good bit of noise, and that's always great to hear from these young players. And Abraham, again, has that path as the backup slot corner. I actually wrote about it for horseshoehuddle.com. You guys can check it. I think it was something I wrote last month where, look, Abraham has that opportunity to win that backup slot, and he doesn't really have a ton of competition there. So I do think that is a great opportunity for him. But coming up, we're going to get to the beautiful part, obviously, which is the offense. I know it wasn't a big offensive day today, but we still got to talk about these guys and what was going on out there with them. But first, are you guys fans of baseball? Are you like me seeing your Washington Nationals selling everybody at the trade deadline, or the Chicago White Sox? I know a lot of you guys like Chicago teams. Chicago Cubs, I think, are a little bit better than those guys. But yeah, baseball season is fun seeing everybody sell at the trade deadline. But don't worry, because with Game Time, you guys can get some great deals on tickets despite the record of your favorite team. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets easier and faster. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to that first pitch. You get killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee with Game Time. You get those last minute deals. Again, you could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and again, that includes Major League Baseball and all your favorite teams out there. You guys get zone deals. You can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. And you get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And lastly, the greatest thing that Game Time offers is the Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, because look, life happens. We have kids, people have kids out there. Like, you really may need to make sure you have that ticket coverage for when life happens. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers. We're back, obviously, with Jake Arthur, our boots on the ground at Colts training camp, giving us the lowdown on everything he saw. We talked defense, we talked Anthony Richardson, we talked Laiatu Latu. We talked about really all the big important details so far in this past practice, Jake. But what did you see from the offense? Do you see anything that really stood out from the offensive line? And again, the pads came on, so obviously there was some hitting going on out there. Did you see anything in particular from the offensive line that stood out to you?
Yeah, well, the most important thing about the line is Braden Smith has taken the next step, and he's now participating in those 11-on-11s. In the most recent practice, day 3, he got back to practice, but was only doing individual work, like position stuff. He did get one chunk of the 11-on-11s. I imagine that'll, go up a little bit tomorrow. And with that, we saw a little more definition to the second and third team lines, because obviously Freeland goes up. So yeah, we're starting to see a little more of a pattern with the second and third lines. Although guys like Danny Pinner and Tanner Bortolini, they're kind of rotating, because I think the Colts do want to see, they want to see what Bortolini can do, but I think they want to keep Pinter fresh as well.
Yeah.
Lots of positives in the run game today, which, caught the cheers of the offensive line plenty of times. You could hear guys like Quentin Nelson and other guys, hollering for the linemen, making big holes. There was one that really stood out, someone whose name I haven't said yet during camp. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon had a couple of nice runs, but Trent Penix, he had a good one today. Bortolini and Lewis Kidd, the right side, the center and guard on that play, they opened up a nice hole for him, and it looked like it would have been a legit run for, maybe 20 yards or so. But those guys were pretty animated and celebrating after that play. So good stuff to see, because it is so hard to tell what's real and what's not when it comes to line play during camp, because it's not live and you're not really tackling guys. But looking at body language, looking at celebrations, those guys know what is legit. And so, kind of using them as a barometer is really good to see. So I think the run game through the first, second, and third teams was pretty positive today.
obviously with the first team, they're going against Grover Stewart on defense. So, but we know the second and third teams who you're going against at nose tackle there. So maybe that helps a little bit with the run game as well. With nose tackle Taven Bryan, obviously is a big factor there. But yeah, no, it's great to hear that the run game's clicking. That they kind of have the rotations down a little bit on the offensive line. And like you mentioned, I think it's good to get that update on Tanner Bordellini because, as you said, the first quarter of camp, he was mostly working with that third team behind Pinter, behind Wesley French. But that's good to hear that he seems to be getting a little bit more reps with the second team and moving up a little bit. And that was something we talked about at the end of, I think, yesterday's show, where it's like, I want to see how these rookies get acclimated more, how they get worked into the lineup more. Obviously, Laiatu Latu, it's a crazy circumstance that he now has to be worked in a lot more, but guys like Tanner Bordellini, Matt Gonsalves, like those guys, you want to see how much they can get worked in there with second and maybe even first teams later in camp.
Yeah, a little progress report on those guys. So Gonsalves has been the second team right tackle the first 3 days, but now that Braden Smith was back at first team right tackle, that sent Freeland down to right tackle, which is kind of his most natural position. And then Gonsalves kicked over to the left side with the second team. Okay. So with it being a battle between those two for swing tackle on this, they'll both make the roster. But being a battle between those two to see who's going to be that sixth lineman, basically, Gonsalves is getting a little bit of action on the left and right now. Bordellini has kind of bounced back and forth between the second and third team center. I can't think if he has played guard or not. I think it's primarily been center. I think we know that's the plan anyways, post Ryan Kelly era, whenever that happens. But so non-offensive line, because I want to address this real quick because they've been very patient for the last couple of shows. So how Kedon Slovis has done. So to be realistic with you, when all the quarterbacks are healthy and there, the only ones who really get game reps are Anthony Flacco and Sam Ehlinger. But there was a day without Flacco when he went to Jacoby Jones' funeral, and Slovis got a little bit of work, and he got a little bit of work today as well because the Colts are starting to pepper in a little bit of developmental periods for guys who don't get many reps in those 11-on-11s and 7-on-7s. They put that smack dab in the middle of practice today, and Slovis got some action out there. And I don't have any like real negatives for him so far. I think he's doing overall pretty well. I think seems firmly as the QB4 compared to what we saw back in the spring as well when Anthony couldn't pass that one day. We saw that Slovis was the next man up. I do remember, I think it was today, I made a comment to one of the other media guys. I was like, Slovis kind of has an arm on him. So I like the arm talent there for Slovis. And the other day, I thought he moved really well when he was pressured out of the pocket. So hopefully that's a good progress report for you on Kedon Slovis.
Yes, we do appreciate your patience with that. We try to get through some questions, obviously, on the show, but also hit all of our major talking points. Would you have anything else you really want to talk about the offense? If not, you could talk, the kickoff returners and stuff. I think that's a really interesting topic too. I saw they had Alec Pierce back there and Kenny Moore back there. It's really fascinating.
It's a little bit of a sore subject for me right now. So the guys that have been back there, they're throwing a lot of guys back there, by the way. So it's a tandem thing. Basically, you have a blocker and an actual return man. But since the spring, Kenny has been out there, and it's driving me insane. I know they want to find out who their best blocker is and who the best returner is for this. But Kenny is so important. You cannot have him returning kicks. And I'm going to say, I'll say this now, he's not going to be the kick returner. That's just not going to happen. For all intents and purposes, it should still be Anthony Gould, but I don't like seeing Kenny take all the unnecessary work as a kick returner. Now, Alec Pierce has been out there, and I think you and I would both agree that's pretty intriguing to be the lead blocker on the kickoffs. Let's just say it's Alec Pierce is the lead blocker on kickoffs with Anthony Gould returning it. I don't hate that.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I mean, maybe you want more I'd be curious to see a Drew Ogletree as a lead blocker because the way he moves with his size, he's a little bit bigger. But if you want more of a stock blocker, Alec Pierce. Like, I think that one works pretty well. I didn't even think of it that way. I saw the guys they were putting back there, and I didn't think that they were putting like blockers back there too. So I was like,
So it's
Alec
still
Pierce returning is fascinating to me.
it's still mostly like corners, receivers, like DBs, receivers, and running backs, like any returner would be. Because I think if you put a guy back there and the ball gets to him, he has to be able to return it.
Right.
So they're kind of sussing out who is the best blocker among them, which obviously we know that's a strong suit for Alec Pierce, and who's best with the ball in their hands.
Right.
They've used a million different guys back there, but some of the most consistent guys who are involved are Alec and Kenny. Now, Kenny returns it seemingly every time, and Alec blocks it like every time. But yeah, they'll get it figured out. The NFL teams, all of them right now, are trying to figure this thing out, and I don't think any of them know what to expect until joint practices in the preseason.
Yeah, that's interesting. So Pierce and like Sermon, I think would make a ton of sense for being like the main blockers. I saw Sermon was back there too.
Penix wouldn't be a bad one. I think I've seen Evan Hull back there. There was one day, I think it was probably the first or second day in my camp notes on Horseshoe Huddle, I put out the entire rotation, and that stayed pretty consistent. They worked on it again today, and I didn't pay super close attention to that because I was watching more O-line, D-line stuff. But it's been pretty consistent, those rotations. So if you go back to like my day 1 or 2 notes, the guys all in that has pretty much been in the mix for blocking and returning.
All right, guys. So Kenny Moore being the Colts kick returner. That's our big update from Jake.
No.
Big update from Jake. And before we get out here, though, I do want to remind you guys to make thank you for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. The draft dudes, Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs, take you inside the front office, making you a smarter NFL fan every single day. Stay up to date on training camp and positional battles as the season draws near. Locked On NFL Scouting is available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And if you guys want to become an insider like our guy Jake Arthur here, you got to go to Locked On Colts. The little link in our chat below, or link in our notes below. Sorry, can't speak right now. Locked On Colts Insider, and chat with us directly and get that inside scoop. Follow that link in our show notes. If you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on social media. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.